欢迎来到佐治亚小帅，听北美华人落地生根的故事。
I hope that 2025 is a great year for you, particularly our Chinese community, as we're going to be celebrating New Year 2025. Congratulations. I'm going to spend this time like you looking back over the blessings of the past year and looking forward to the challenges and opportunities of 2025, and I look forward to spending that time together with our local Chinese community as well as many other people who live in Duluth Suwanee and Sugar Hill. Let me know anything I can do to be a good friend and advocate in the Georgia State House.
朋友们大家好呀，新年快乐，蛇年大吉，欢迎收听佐治亚小帅 Asian Answers Podcast。 本期嘉宾是佐治亚州众议院议员 Representative Matt Reeves。 2024年大选他第一次连任成功，被再次选举为佐治亚州第99选区的议员。在本期节目的1个小时中，我们详细讨论了佐治亚州好几个政府支出和教育、税收、房产相关的法律。他也分享了个人的从政经历，屡败屡战之后的接连胜利。如果你有考虑未来搬到佐治亚州或者亚特兰大都会区，这一集不可错过。本期节目是全英文的对话，为了方便更多的听众，也会在中间每一大段之前用中文做简短的介绍。欢迎大力转发，或者在苹果播客留下好评，会对我非常重要。Hello everyone, Happy Chinese New Year! Welcome to the Asian Answers Podcast, 佐治亚小帅。 Today's guest is Representative Matt Reeves from Georgia State House District 99, which covers the Duluth, Suwanee, and Sugar Hill area. He was re-elected in November 2024. In today's episode, we will discuss some topics like education spending in Georgia, tax and homeowner legislations, and school security. If you are considering moving to Georgia from other states, I would say this is a must-listen episode. Don't forget to share this episode if you find it very helpful, or leave a comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. To make it easier for more listeners, there will be very brief Chinese summaries every few minutes. Now let's get started. 节目刚开始，我们从刚刚度过的圣诞假期开始聊起，从家庭花费说到政府花费。毕竟有句话说得好，一屋不扫，何以扫天下？我们还顺带着聊了佐治亚州的毒品问题。
First of all, I would like to thank you for Asian Answers podcast. Would you like to give a short introduction to our audience?
Absolutely. Matt Reeves, I'm a state representative from Duluth and Suwanee and Sugar Hill in Gwinnett County, Georgia, outside of Atlanta. I also am a business and real estate litigation lawyer. I've been doing that for nearly 22 years after graduating from UGA Law School. So it's great to sit down with you today, and I hope we have an informative time for your many listeners, I know many of whom are Chinese Americans.
That's right. Today is a special day. It's 2 days after the Christmas and a few days before the New Year. So you have some traditions for your family Christmas?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is a great time of year really to stop and be thankful for family and friends and things that have happened over the last year. Christmas, of course, is a great time. My family and I went to church on Christmas Eve and had a family dinner together, and then got together with some additional relatives on Christmas Day. And this year, my wife had a friend who was helping out people at a local addiction detox center, so we were able to take Christmas gifts and have a Christmas program with those people who were working hard to turn their life around and put addictions behind them, and that was really touching to see that. The people are making that courageous step at this time of year with Christmas and New Year. So those are some things I've done over the break. I look forward to New Year's Eve and New Year's Day coming up, and I look forward to 2025. I hope it's a great year for everybody and certainly getting ready for a big year.
What type of addiction? Is that drugs?
Yes, drugs and alcohol primarily. Some people got there due to criminal legal trouble. Other people got there because relatives had intervened. But they are all there because they voluntarily sought treatment. It's in Duluth here in Gwinnett County, and there's another one in Alpharetta similar to that in Fulton County. It's good to know that places like that out there for people in need. There's a big mental health component with addiction, of course, in Georgia. The state of Georgia is serious about meeting people's mental health needs because that's a big piece of the equation on addiction.
Yeah. Is drug a big problem here in Gwinnett County?
Well, it's a problem nationwide in America. I heard a very shocking statistic recently in 2023, which was my first year as a state house member in Georgia. Over 80,000 people in America died of opioids and fentanyl and various drug overdoses with those drugs. One pill can kill. It's life and death now. People could experiment with drugs 10 or 20 or 30 years ago without it being a life and death issue, but now it is something that can be deadly on the first time. So making sure that people stay away from drugs and stay away from addiction is a life and death issue now.
You say 80,000, right?
80,000 across America.
I remember that the entertainment marijuana is still a felony here, right?
It's not usually a felony unless you're carrying large quantities of it that puts you in the category of being a drug dealer, having possession with intent to distribute by virtue of the quantity that you have. Marijuana, Georgia has created a medical cannabis program which is beginning stages, so medical cannabis is something that is an option, and there's also some CBD and hemp that is legal for medical purposes in Georgia, but recreational use of marijuana is still illegal here in Georgia. Also, federal law places restrictions on marijuana and other recreational drugs.
Yeah, let's get back to the Christmas. Yeah, because I'm really interested how much money you will spend for the few days of the Christmas holiday.
Too much. And it's important to keep the real meaning of Christmas at the forefront. I try to be good to my wife and kids and friends, and I end up spending a lot on Christmas.
Like a few thousand?
Ooh, I don't know about a few thousand, but a lot.
A lot, okay.
A lot. Yeah. I'm not as good of a gift giver as my wife. My wife is a good gift giver. So, that's one of the love languages. You've got gifts and words of affirmation and giving people a pat on the back, physical touch, but giving gifts is a talent and an art that I don't have.
That's right. I have an Excel list who will receive my Christmas gift because I don't have a lot of budget, but I try to keep in relationship with some really good friends.
There's an old saying, it's the thought that counts. So, being thoughtful with your gifts rather than spending too much money, I think is important.
I asked that question because I have a follow-up question. That what type of spending you feel like that's most worthy in this holiday season?
I think giving gifts that will last a long time and that will be used a lot. That's some things I try. There are some gifts that are, really popular. They're the hot item in December, but then by January or February, people are already tired of them. So giving a gift that'll stand the test of time, I think, is always important. Jewelry's good and things like that. One thing, I'd like to mention, don't forget those people who have birthdays right around Christmas. My dad's birthday is New Year's Eve, and I have a number of relatives and friends and coworkers who have a birthday around Christmas. So those people who have a birthday around Christmas, don't let that day get past you.
Okay, that's a really good reminder there. Do you know why I asked those spending questions in the very beginning of our conversation today? Yeah, because I was about to ask some government spending.
Oh, good.
How do you feel like being re-elected?
I am so thankful to be able to continue to serve the people of Duluth and Suwanee and Sugar Hill and Gwinnett County. It's an honor and a privilege to do that, and I'm looking forward to the next 2 years.
What's the largest category they spend most money?
Georgia state budget, I believe, is around $30 billion, if I remember right, a little bit more than that. That is a little bit unclear because not all of that is direct state money. Some of that is federal money that the state handles. So when you get down to the amount that is, purely state money, it's a much lesser amount than that amount. But about half of the state budget is spent on education, whether it's K through 12 schools or pre-kindergarten or colleges. About half the state, or a little bit more than half the state of Georgia budget is spent on education, which I think is great. Not a lot of states have that high of a ratio.
What's the average for other states, let's say Alabama or South Carolina or some blue states?
One good thing about Georgia is we have a good bond rating, which means we don't pay a lot of interest on government indebtedness, and a lot of other states do not have a good bond rating, so a large portion of their budget is spent on interest, on bond interest, whereas Georgia does not have a lot of bond liability. So I would have to do some research to answer that question of the percentage, but I do know that Hope Scholarship is very unique to Georgia. Georgia enacted that a little over 30 years ago under Governor Zell Miller, who advocated to have a lottery to fund college education, the Hope Scholarship. And then over the years, money has also been devoted to pre-kindergarten funds through the Hope Scholarship and the Georgia Lottery. So that is unique in Georgia to multiple things, whereas in Georgia has said if we're going to have gambling, it's going to go to education. I think that's been a good return on the investment. So, but to get back to answering your question, more than half the state budget is spent on education. A large portion of the remaining, less than half, is on health care, Medicare, other forms of government expenditures on health care. And then you have the rest of the government. You have state patrol, public safety, grants for police and public safety. And so when you get down to it, there's a very small portion of the budget where we have a choice. You know, we have those education, health care, and police obligations, and there's not much left after that.
如前面所听到的，每年州预算300多亿美金的一半都花在了教育相关的议题上。我们接下来会展开为什么佐治亚州政府的花费非常的保守和克制，尤其详细介绍了 Hope Scholarship 希望奖学金用彩票给教育注资，每年超过100亿美金。
What about the wages and salaries for the public service people?
That's right. That's why you got to be careful on that. Jacksonville, Florida had a lot of stress in their local city government a few years ago because of the retirement and pension of their workforce. The city and county government consolidated, so they had one large workforce, and the retirement and pension liability almost caused, the local government to go broke. So it's not the government's money, it's the people's money. And so salary, retirement, all the government expenditures, you need to be very conservative with that because it could get out of hand and it could cause programs to collapse and people get laid off in the government if you're too generous. You need to be a fiscal conservative with government money is what I believe. I think state government ought to do a few things and do them well and leave the rest of the money to working people and to local governments and not take on too many obligations.
That's right. I was in California for 2 years in my early careers. Then I moved to Georgia early 2021. So there I remember at least once, maybe twice, I received the checks from the state government because they return some part of tax. I'm not sure if you remember that. At least that's very small amount. Yeah, maybe 300 or 400. But I can't remember that because I have never received something like, okay, tax return. Right. After the tax reporting season, you still receive some returns.
Well, I'm all for tax reductions and letting people keep more of what they earn, but the government shouldn't be spending money in order to try to get votes or to pick winners or losers. The government ought to let working people and small businesses keep as much of that money as possible and ought to be very careful about the things.
You just mentioned the Hope Scholarship. Could you say more about that?
Absolutely. It is a merit-based scholarship, so it rewards students who work hard and make good grades, generally 3.0 or shortly above 3.0 is the goal to tell these students, look, study hard, make B's, make A's. You will have abundant funding for your college education. So there are about 26 public universities in Georgia. There are also some technical colleges in Georgia, such as Gwinnett Technical College. The technical colleges have a slightly different approach to Hope Scholarship than the universities, but students at Georgia public universities can have a large portion of their tuition covered, and then some of the private universities in Georgia can have a tuition equalization grant where the students can have more affordable college. One example is Mercer Engineering Research Center, which is associated with Robins Air Force Base down in Middle Georgia. Engineering students at Mercer can get a tuition equalization grant.
That's your undergraduate school, right?
That's right. I love Mercer. I love UGA. If you look at higher ed in Georgia since the Hope Scholarship came into effect, it has really improved. And I think supporting our students and helping them achieve their dreams in education is something to keep well funded and keep as a priority. It's such a unique merit scholarship, and it's done so much good for so many young people getting their college education. You know, you could come out of college today, if you don't have the Hope Scholarship, you could come out of college with $200,000 in debt or more. That's just a big burden for young people to have as they're approaching the workforce.
How much that would be? I am a student, graduate from a public high school here, very good academic performance. I'm going to Georgia Tech, which is a public school, right?
That's right.
What if I'm going to Emory? That's a private. What about, let's say, Duke University, which is out of state, right?
That's right.
So how much I can get?
All right, so Duke is out of state, so you would have to get scholarships there, and if you have need-based financial aid, you could pursue that. Emory, there would be a tuition equalization grant, that's the Hope Scholarship Funds, and then you can get whatever need-based financial aid that's available. And then Emory has a large endowment from Coca-Cola and many other alumni and donors, and so there are many scholarship opportunities at Emory, and I definitely encourage students, particularly in healthcare, to consider Emory. Emory brings in so many people from around the world to Georgia, but it's also there for Georgia students. So pursue those scholarship funds. It's expensive, but you can get that defrayed from scholarships and need-based financial aid in addition to the Hope Scholarships tuition equalization grant. Georgia Tech, on the other hand, if you're a Georgia student, you can get into Georgia Tech if you have the Hope Scholarship and pay very little, if any, tuition. So it's one of the best deals in the country.
How much?
It depends on the formula from year to year, but this year we fully funded the Hope Scholarship, and so a student qualifying for Hope, I don't believe, would have any tuition.
Zero. If they go to a public university like Georgia Tech.
Correct. And they qualify for Hope, and they come in with the Hope Scholarship. So when the Hope Scholarship is fully funding and working correctly, if you get a 3.0, then you can get that full scholarship.
Will there be a cap?
No.
There is no cap?
Private colleges are similar to out-of-state schools in that a Georgia student is not necessarily going to have an advantage over other students at the private schools, other than the tuition equalization grant, which does benefit Georgia students as opposed to out-of-state students. But it's not as large as the Hope Scholarship is. But I would definitely encourage students in Georgia, look at those 26 Georgia universities. You mentioned Georgia Tech. You've got University of Georgia. You've got Augusta College over in Augusta. There's a big Army base there that does cybersecurity. So in addition to healthcare, Augusta has cybersecurity and a lot of IT education. Kennesaw, you mentioned that. That's one of the biggest universities in Georgia. Georgia State has many programs. There are so many good university options in Georgia. Yeah. College is affordable in Georgia for students who work hard. Technical colleges have a little bit different of a budget and system than universities do, but they are very affordable. They typically do not have dorms and residences like universities do. The technical colleges do not, but they are an affordable place to attend college for students who want to do things like there are many healthcare, construction, repair, many practical lines of work.
接下来是 Georgia Promise Scholarship Act 给非公立教育的家庭最多$6500的支持。支持这个法案的人会说，这是对整个教育体系的重大补丁；反对的人会说，这是对本就艰难求生的公立系统釜底抽薪。很多华人家庭对在家教育 Homeschool 并不熟悉，我们来听听看。
Other than the college scholarship, let's talk about the younger kids. I was really impressed by the 6,500, you know what number I'm talking about? Yes. The school voucher program that governor can sign this year. First, could you please give a brief introduction to our audience about that program? Secondly, would you share a little bit about your own opinion on that?
Sure. The school choice bill that passed in 2024 in Georgia would not have gotten done if Georgia had not already fully funded our public schools. We have a school formula called Quality Basic Education, or QBE, and that was developed in the 1980s. And for decades, Georgia had not fully funded the QBE school formula. Around 10 years ago, a little more than 10 years ago, Georgia became the #1 place to do business in the United States. And I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, I know that.
I think Georgia needs to keep that going.
Because I subscribed the website of Georgia Commons Department. Every year they will send email to me, all right, we have been 10 years, 11 years.
That's right. I think it's up to 11 years now. The Georgia economic development efforts have paid off. But when Georgia became the #1 place to do business, that's when Georgia was able to afford to fully fund our public schools. So for 11 years now, Georgia has fully funded that quality basic education formula. Additionally, public schools in Georgia are largely funded by property taxes. The last 7 or 8 years or more, we have had a massive increase in the value of real estate, and therefore our local schools have reaped huge income from property taxes over the last 7 or 8 years also. So right now, there are abundant funds with local K through 12 public schools, and I'm proud of that. It should be that way. However, there are some schools that have failed on almost any metrics for many decades in the past, and there's no end in sight of them turning around even with robust funding. So in 2024, what Georgia did is it enacted this Promise Scholarship Program. It was a bill that had numerous public school benefits in it, such as transportation, pre-K facility funding, and many other public school benefits in addition to the 2024 state budget. But what Georgia said in that Georgia Promise Scholarship Program is, for the 25% of the lowest performing schools in Georgia, those students and their parents can take the state funding for that student and move to a different school. They can transfer to a public school, and that's something that is a public school benefit. There's more public school choice in Georgia now than ever before, but 6,500 state funding can go to the school of the parent and the children's choice. Now, the local funding stays at the local level, and therefore the per pupil ratio increases for those bottom 25% schools if a student leaves. So let's take an example. If you have a school with 1,000 children,
okay,
and it was a failing school, and 10 of those children and their parents decide for those children to go to some other school, the remaining 990 students would get to keep the state fund or the local funding, even though the state funding went elsewhere. And therefore, the per pupil ratio would actually increase.
Oh, that's interesting. When you talk about local, is that county level or?
Yes.
Okay, so if I move from a bad school in Jackson County to Gwinnett, I want to say Gwinnett to Jackson, right, but that's not polite. Okay, move from Jackson to Gwinnett County, what is going to happen?
In that case, you'd go from a Jackson County public school to a Gwinnett County public school. So Jackson County, they would lose that student's state funding. Mm-hmm. That student's state funding would be funded in Gwinnett at the public school in Gwinnett. But Jackson County would get to keep that local money. And therefore, the per pupil funding would actually increase and the class size would go down. So those are some things to keep in mind about public school benefits. Now, that's on the public school. Let's say that child in Jackson County decided to go to a Catholic school in Gainesville. The local money would stay in Jackson County. The student and the parent could select the school where the state money would go for that student. Now, that's if the Jackson County school is in the bottom 25%. Okay, so on the public school choice, for a student to be eligible to take the $6,500 to a school of their choice, it would have to be a bottom 25% school.
So how much is local? How much is state level?
It varies. Like the city of Atlanta schools, I think they're like, $15,000 per student. Many other school systems, it's like $10,000 or $12,000 per student. And I could be wrong on that. It could be more than that. Okay. So the state portion, the $6,500 is roughly equivalent to the state portion, I believe.
Before I talk to you, I was originally very shocked because from my point of view, people who have financial problems, they go to public school. But if they are super rich, they go to private school, which is non-public. But it seems not like that case, right? Because you mentioned there are some other non-public schools, they are in the not good financial scenarios.
Well, if you look at some of the best performing schools in Georgia, they're public schools.
That's right.
Okay, and so those 75% of the schools that are doing well, we ought to make sure they're fully funded. Those 25% that are not doing well, we need to give those parents and students a choice, and then we need to, the remaining funds and students and teachers that those trouble schools have, we need to make sure that they're on a path to success. And that's why that Promise Scholarship Bill had a lot of programs for innovation, for literacy, for transportation, for pre-K funding. Georgia has a literacy problem. There's about 1 million people in Georgia who cannot read or cannot read well enough to function. We need to break that cycle. The key on literacy is at the pre-K level, so making sure that we have all the resources we can when those children are 2, 3, 4 years old. That's all the more important. That's what I want to make sure happens, that not only our public schools, K through 12, are robustly funded and have resources, but also pre-K programs have adequate funding.
In your own church, you go to church every Sunday, right?
That's right. Perimeter Church over in Johns Creek.
Okay. How many families do you know they are homeschooling?
Perimeter has an above average number of homeschool parents.
Okay.
But if you look at Perimeter Church, we have, people from Gwinnett and Fulton and other surrounding areas. The vast majority of students are public school students, and then you have a smaller percentage who go to Perimeter School or other private schools in the area. And then you have a smaller number that are homeschool. So I would say homeschool is in the single digits, maybe 5% or so of the students.
5% of all the
right,
students.
of all the students. But Perimeter does have a larger number than usual of homeschool parents and students. And that's something that's evolved over time. I think it's attracted people knowing that, there are resources and there are strong numbers and there are strengthened numbers with homeschool people who have a community. There are some good homeschool communities in Gwinnett County and North Fulton.
I did some research, and I do find this funding non-public schools being a trend, being a wave over America. Not only Georgia, I see it in some other states. Why is that?
I can speak for the way I look at it, and I think that our local public schools in Georgia, we need to make sure that they have what they need to succeed, because vast majority of our students and teachers are there. It's why a lot of people move to Georgia. It's why a lot of people move to Gwinnett County. So we need to have excellent public schools. In areas where public schools are not succeeding, we need to improve that rapidly. And that's why I think empowering the students and the parents is important in situations where you have failing schools.
接下来我们讨论了佐治亚州的税务和学区相关的情况。作为众议院司法委员会的副主席 Vice Chairman of Judiciary Committee 以及资深的地产律师，他的话非常可信。如果你考虑搬到亚特兰大都会区，他还详细介绍了有哪些不错的学校可供选择。
You know Duncan Park?
Yes, Hamilton Mill.
Yes, I used to play basketball there. And there is one time I know a guy from other states. I asked him, why did you move to Georgia? That's 2021 or 2022. Because I'm newly here, right? I asked some other people, why did you move here? Yeah, they told me that we can have quality education for the kids with a relatively fair price. That means the public school is not that high. Yeah, and that's the reason they moved here. They live in Hamilton Mill. That's how I know the public schools here.
If you talk to realtors, the number one driver of house desirability is what school district are they in. And then the second thing people want to know is, safety and are they going to be safe in their neighborhoods and out shopping and the amenities that are there.
What's the most popular school? And also give me 2 or 3 that are not in Gwinnett.
Sure, I will. The schools in Gwinnett County that are in my area, which is Duluth, Suwanee, and Sugar Hill, are North Gwinnett High School, Peachtree Ridge High School, Lanier High School, and Duluth High School. Just to the west of us in Johns Creek, you're going to pay more for your house over there. I had a realtor tell me there are some months where there are 0 houses sold that are less than $1 million on a lot of reports he looks at in Johns Creek. But that's Northview High School and Johns Creek High School. And then nearby there's Chattahoochee and Lambert High School. And then I'm trying to think, Denmark is another one. Paul Duke High School and Norcross High School are in Gwinnett County near Duluth. Gwinnett School of Science, Technology, and Math, GSMST. A lot of students like to go to Georgia Tech and MIT from there. It's a very good math and science STEM school.
If you want your kids go to MIT.
That's right. You mentioned affordable. City of Decatur in DeKalb County, they have a city school system and they have very high property taxes there. So Gwinnett County, with having 1 million people, that's how we can fund good public schools, is we have a high population. Even though we have a lot of kids in school, we have a lot of people paying for those schools.
My property tax jumped twice. The first time is something like around 20%, and the next jump is also 20%, and now it's flat.
Here's what we did about that. I was proud this year to sponsor the first property tax referendum since the 1980s in Gwinnett County. It was a bipartisan effort. We worked, the legislators for Gwinnett County, there are 23 of us. We worked with our local school system. We crunched the numbers and we doubled the homestead exemption. And then we also gave some additional tax relief to teachers, to law enforcement, to active duty military personnel, to hospital personnel. And so those public service employees got some additional tax relief. That passed with 75% of the vote. this year. It'll go into effect next year. But if you disagree with your value, appeal that value. And also, depending on your jurisdiction, the state did an opt-in or opt-out way to keep the value from going up every year. Gwinnett County's portion of the tax bill is called value offset exemption, but the state did something where the locals can allow themselves to be opted in to control the value.
Hey folks, you'd better trust him in the real estate areas because he's so experienced being a real estate attorney.
I've really enjoyed working with people for 22 years on that.
I don't have any kids right now, and I don't know the details of each school. So for the schools that are lacking of resources, how bad that could be? Quality teachers or some other books, I don't know, yeah, or how bad that could be.
I think some metrics you want to look at are the days of instruction time, the academic rigor, how many AP classes are offered at the school, or the students succeeding. If English is their second language, are they learning English so that they can, do well in classes and on tests that require English proficiency? Workforce, are you exposing the children to things that would help them on healthcare, technology, and programs with high demands out there? Those are some things that I think we want to look for in schools. In addition to safety, safety and discipline, I think those are something that parents expect to see in the schools, to have good discipline and the teachers feel safe and they are in a class with students who are there to learn and not disrupt the class.
Yeah.
接下来是校园安全，尤其是去年9月在隔壁 Winder 市阿帕拉契中学发生的灾难性枪击事件。14岁的学生持枪进入校园，2名学生和2名教师死亡。Matt 议员在这里讲述了应对和加强的措施，包括但不限于部署校园警察，还讨论了社交媒体的立法，意图给佐治亚州社交媒体的注册设置年龄下限。
Speaking of safety, you know what I'm going to talk about? The Appalachia, the tragic shooting this year earlier. Is there anything the government did or the House did to provide a safer environment for kids?
Absolutely. Gwinnett County Police Leader implemented a lot of technology and has prevented situations from happening. Here's an example. He set up an app that the students can use to do anonymous reports of danger. And there was a student at Duluth Middle School after the Appalachia tragedy who did have a gun in his backpack, and another student was able to report that, and the student was apprehended shortly after he got to the school because of that reporting the Gwinnett County schools had implemented, and I'm proud of that. Gwinnett County schools take school safety very seriously and have used every available resource as well as experience and expertise for the benefit of our children and our teachers. Now, statewide, that tragedy in Appalachia happened in August or so. It was heartbreaking and got my attention. I immediately reached out to those who represent that area. That's Holt Persinger and Chuck Efstration, who I serve with in the House. I know they are active and committed to implementing additional state school safety measures, as is Speaker of the House, Speaker John Burns, as is Governor Kemp. So I think there will be some additional school safety measures in Georgia this legislative session. I look forward to actively working on that because I work every day for public safety that I'm down at the Capitol. I think we can do better in this area. But I will say this. There have been tragedies nationwide, and in response to that, Georgia said we are going to give money per school for school safety, and that's how Gwinnett County's implemented their Gwinnett County School Police and how many other schools have implemented safety programs such as the one at Appalachia where they were able to respond very quickly once something bad broke out in the way of violence. So, I think getting active and proactive to keep anything like that from happening again, I think is of utmost importance. It's a life or death issue.
How many in-house police officers for each school? Is that a number we can see on average?
Yes. Not every elementary school has an officer there all day. Generally, the high schools have officers there in the largest numbers, and then the middle schools are next, and the elementary schools, you have fewer police there.
Okay.
And that is because when you get up to the high school level, you have students ones who engage in violence or drug dealing or something like that.
That guy is 14 years old, right?
That's right.
I saw the reverse way. Because I feel like, okay, the primary, they are more vulnerable. The high school, like 16 years old, okay.
Well, you look at that school shooting in Tennessee, number one, it was at a church school, and then it was more of a K through 8th grade, younger kids. So, and also the teachers there, kindergarten and elementary school teachers, I think are...
Yeah, what happened? Well, I see quite a few of the shooters are the young students themselves, right?
Yep. I think a couple things play into that. Number one, mental health. I think it's a wake-up call that mental health right now is in a worse place than it was 5 or 10 years ago. Social media, COVID, mental health, and also violent video games that are out there and addictive and, have students role-playing, killing people. I think those are some things to disrupt and to have more of a healthy approach to life. Get students off of, violent video games and mental health issues and get them into more healthy outlets and dealing in ways that are not antisocial and violent.
Is that the reason for the new law this year, for the social media law? Kids under 16 years old cannot open social media accounts themselves. Is that a real law right now?
I believe it is in Georgia. I know that we worked on that. Scott Hilton, representative from here in Gwinnett County, and others worked on that. And I think the thought process is because social media, you have third parties involved and kids can get victimized and preyed upon. You need to have either older kids or you need to have parental involvement. Okay. I think we had two things I kind of get a little bit linked in my mind. There was one about keeping obscenity out of the hands of minors, and then there's the one about social media, making sure that you can't sign up for social media until you're a certain age. And I think we enacted both. If not, I know we'll continue working on it because, there's so many studies that say if young people overdo it on their iPhones and social media and all that, it just decreases their attention span, it decreases their ability to communicate in healthy ways. There are so many things that can, affect mental health and quality of life.
You have signed up social media. I have signed up social media. When asked what's your birthday, you put any number on that. How can we make sure this law getting executed correctly? Because everyone can put any number on that, right?
Well, I think empowering the parents so that if they find that their children have signed up for accounts using bad information and the platforms have allowed them to do that, to have a reporting procedure in there. That's one way to do it, have some accountability. Okay. It's just like selling cigarettes to minors. Let's have some accountability and some repercussions for breaking the law.
So that's a law for the parents?
Well, no, for the social media platforms. Social media platforms need to implement some measures to make sure that minors are not.
Now I got you.
这一段是一些成长故事、个人经历，包括屡战屡败、屡败屡战，第3次终于成功的竞选故事。听完你就知道如何从零开始做议员。
By the way, how many kids do you have and how old are they?
My son Paul's in college, UNG Oconee, and then I have a high school senior daughter and high school freshman daughter. So my son's not a teenager anymore. He's graduated out of that, so he'll be 21. And he's doing his general studies right now, so I don't know that he's going to do law. He's got a good personality and all that, but I don't know if he's... he did come to the Capitol with me recently, and it's definitely studying and figuring out what his talents and gifts are for the workplace and all that, and getting a good education right now at University of North Georgia.
Yeah, I believe your parents or your grandparents, are they also in the Tony area?
My dad is a lawyer. He's a retired lawyer. Okay. He retired just a few years ago. He's 80 years old now. But then you go back to my grandparents. None of my 4 grandparents went to college. They grew up in that generation that lived through the Great Depression, went and fought. One of my granddads fought in World War II. The other was over here, helping out in that effort. You had a generation of folks who grew up with very modest finances and learned the value of hard work and fight of good and evil in World War II. So good folks. I look up to them a lot. Those 4 grandparents who didn't go to college, they put all of my mom and dad and aunts and uncles through college. So they knew the value of an education.
When did you want to get started? Or what's the reason you want to get started?
I love that we've talked a lot about family today, and my hero in life, my granddad, fought in World War II. He was a farmer. He served on his local school board, and he was a deacon in his church, and so he fulfilled his responsibilities with work and raising my mom and aunt and uncles, but he also, did good out in the community in a variety of roles. And so he's somebody who passed that on to me of, do a good job on your work and your family and all that, but also make your community better than how you found it. Get out there and make a positive impact on your community. He's a strong impact. During my adult life, several of my law school classmates at UGA had worked at the Capitol as a lawyer for the House Judiciary Committee. I got introduced to Wendell Willard, who was the former chair of the House Judiciary Committee, and I was probably the fourth or fifth in a series of law school classmates who worked with him, and I got to see the Capitol and how things worked down there, got to meet a lot of people, and I think that convinced me if I had the opportunity to get down there, I could do a good job. Being a state legislator in Georgia, it's part-time. We have 40 business days a year, so it does allow me to continue my work and the rest of life. There are some public service jobs where it's a full-time job or it's like a couple of nights a week, 12 months out of the year. This is one that I felt was compatible with, my work as a lawyer and that I could get some good things done.
But there'll still be over a decade. I believe you graduated from your PhD.
2003, that's right.
Yes, and you started your first election in 2018.
That's right.
So there's still over
about 15
a decade.
years. I worked at the Capitol in 2008 and 9. I was the lawyer for the House Judiciary Committee in 2008. And then in 2009, I served in the Evidence Code Committee. So those were two things I did. Back in law school, 9/11 happened when I was in law school, too, to mark that time. So I graduated in 2003, but I was sitting in class at UGA when that attack happened in New York in the Pentagon.
So, okay, gotcha. So you have did a lot of voluntary of the part-time in the past years before you really started for the State House, right?
Absolutely. I got involved in the community, was active in my church and community, and did a good job on my work, spent time with kids, but also was active in the community. I didn't just show up one day and say, hey, I want to run for office. I was actively engaged in the community in many areas. The byproduct of that, Nicole Love Hendrickson, the chairwoman of the Gwinnett County Board of Commissioners, she and I served on the Duluth Parks Board together a long time ago long before she was a Gwinnett County Commission chair and I was a state legislator. So, the people who want to make a difference, get out there in the community, you'll meet some great people and you'll go on to other things.
I did review that record because the first time in 2018, although you lost, in the next time, 2020, that's a war thing. So how do you feel like, okay, the first time is bad, but that's acceptable, but the second time you feel like, okay, I'm more experienced, but the results become worse, and what makes you still want to join the third time?
Well, the area that I represent in the State House was a part of the State Senate district that I had run in previously.
That's right.
And I did pretty well there. So, I saw that even though I didn't win the election, I won that in the areas that are in the State House seat now. 2020 was a weird year all around with COVID and social distancing and, presidential election year. You had a bunch of weird stuff go on, so I couldn't take that personally.
And January 6th.
That's right. And then 2018 also had some national dynamics in play in this area in that state Senate race. And a lot of it was Republican and Democrat in that state Senate district that I ran in. So I learned a lot, met a lot of people, but did not take the election outcomes personally. It's a good gut check. Hey, what do I want to do this for? I want to do it to get out there and serve the people, serve the community. So that kept me going, and also, knowing some neighbors, friends and neighbors supported me at the ballot box and have an opportunity to go serve in this new House district.
这里 Matt 议员讲了家庭背景，尤其是祖父的二战经历和中美建交之后佐治亚州农民组团旅游中国的故事。不可绕开的是吉米·卡特总统，他冲破层层阻碍，最终完成中美邦交的正常化。他也是一个前佐治亚州农民 Old Peanut Farmer。此处有一个预告，前2个礼拜吉米·卡特总统遗体告别，我录了一期声音日志和街头采访，会在以后播出。
That's right. You mentioned your grandparents, right. Grandpa, at least twice. Is it your dad's dad or that's your mom's?
My mom's dad. Since we're on the podcast with a lot of Chinese Americans, my grandfather and grandmother visited China in the early 1980s. When the U.S. and China normalized relations in 1979, there was a group of...
That's in Carter's time, right?
That's right. My grandfather and President Carter are cousins from the same area in Sumter County, Georgia. There was a group of farmers from Georgia who got to go to China when the U.S. and China normalized relations. So they went over there and got to see China in one of the first groups to go there. So growing up, I got souvenirs and books and things like that from China and got some firsthand experience.
What's that souvenir?
Like a lot of silk purses and, Christmas ornaments and decorations and things like that. A lot of books, picture books and things like that. Also, my pediatrician in South Georgia when I was little was an immigrant from China, Dr. Judy Cheng. Doctor who recruited her here is still around, Dr. Raymond Ho. He's here in Gwinnett County. I've gotten to know him the last several years, and that's a little bit going back to those grandparents. They definitely were out there living a big life and, try to learn as much and be good students of life and all that kind of stuff, and did stuff like visiting China.
And you said he was in World War II, right? Or what country he was?
He was born in 1925, I believe, so he was very young when he went to Europe, and after D-Day and all that, he joined the Allies like in Luxembourg and Belgium and that area in the Battle of the Bulge. So he was on the other side of France. He did basic training, went from Georgia to do basic training, I believe, in Texas. I saw something recently where he did like artillery training in Camp Blanding, Florida, which is in Jacksonville where, I lived growing up. And so he joined the Battle of the Bulge. My great uncle, my grandmother's brother, went in the Pacific, and he got malaria when he was over there. Shortly after my great-grandmother died, he had helped with her funeral and all that. He had a heart attack and died because his body had been weakened during that fight in the Pacific and in World War II. So, I got to see firsthand in my family of the impact decades later that, war and things like that can have on people and their families. Freedom's not free. Those folks really earned it and at great sacrifice.
That's right. And when he came back from Europe, he became a deacon of a church.
Well, it took him a little while to get there on that. On my dad's side, my dad was born during World War II. Granddad had 2 kids already, so he was here. There was an old World War I airport or training airport in Sumter County, which later became, I think it's named after Jimmy Carter now, but Souther Field, where Lindbergh did flights. They had some degree of homeside military thing down there, so he did not go over to Europe or the Pacific in World War II.
By the way, is Jimmy Carter the only one president from Georgia?
Yes.
That's what I remember too.
I was given a tour at the Capitol the other day, and I said that, and then I thought, is that right? And Woodrow Wilson lived in Augusta growing up. His father was a pastor in Augusta, but he graduated and lived elsewhere. So Georgia claimed him, but Georgia was not his home state. So those are some ties there. And then I show people at the Capitol Button Gwinnett's bust in the rotunda at the Georgia Capitol. He was, that's who Gwinnett County is named after. And he died in a duel shortly after the Declaration of Independence was signed. So that's why he's not all that well known. Everybody knows John Hancock and others, but Button Gwinnett died in a duel in 1777.
Okay, I would not know that if you don't tell me. Yeah, but we can claim at least Martin Luther King.
That's right. Just like President Carter, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. He is probably the most well-known Georgian around the world.
After this year's election, the big obvious majority for GOP, right? My next question is, do you see some key areas that 2 parties should work together?
Absolutely. Troubles me when we can't get together on public safety issues. We need to work together on that. I think home ownership and housing, that's something that is a big need. Those are some things we need to look for common ground. The American dream of home ownership, public safety, good schools, good hospitals, those are some things. There's abundant room to have common ground.
I see you are the vice chair for the House Judiciary Committee.
That's right.
Yeah, could you share some responsibility and challenging for that?
There are not that many lawyers in state government in Georgia. There used to be a lot of lawyers. There aren't now. I think having some lawyers who know how the law affects people and life and business and things like that is important, and I'm honored to serve on the Judiciary Committee. There are a lot of, it's been about 20 years since we reformed our legal system, and I think Governor Kemp is studying some legal reform or tort reform measures, so that's something I'm likely to be working on this session on the Judiciary Committee. So those are some things that come to mind.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to confirm with you. The term for the governor, that will be 2 as maximum, right?
That's right.
Same as the presidency.
That's right, and that changed in Georgia in the 1980s. From the 1700s to the 1980s, the governor was 1 term in Georgia. In the 1980s, the term of the governor was capped at 2 terms rather than 1.
Yeah, I'm a first-generation immigration here. I was born in China. I do see you have a good relationship with Korean representative Song.
That's right.
Yes, because I did some homework and find her also first generation. He came to United States. He was born in Seoul, South Korea, and came to Georgia when she was like 10 years old, or maybe teenagers. The first generation, how to get started if we want to enter the public service area.
Good question. Here in Georgia, here are some things to think about. There's a PAGE program for young people for middle school and early high school where you can apply. Each representative can sponsor a certain amount. You get to go spend a day at the Capitol. You get to learn how the process works. You get to meet a lot of people. So I definitely would recommend the PAGE program. In college, there are many internships that you could do either short-term or for a semester where you could work with folks in elective office or in state agencies such as Department of Health to get to learn about particular government subject matters. Your major in college, you could do political science or public policy. Georgia Tech has a good public policy program, even though most people know it for science and engineering. Also, in your community, get to know your elected officials. I am always glad to hear from constituents, so don't be hesitant to introduce yourself to your state house member, your state senate member, city council, mayor. Get to know them, let them know what you're interested in, and I bet they will call upon you and get you involved in different areas in the community. So those are a few things to be mindful of in getting involved in the public arena.
这一段讲的是如何扩大政府收入，尤其是在线体育博彩的合法化。
Let's go back to our original question about the government spending. Is there some part of money that you think that state government should not collect from the taxpayers right now?
I'd like to get the state income tax lower. Right now it's at 5.39%. It used to be 6%. So we've reduced a significant amount in a short amount of time. I'd like to get that income tax lower. I think people ought to be able to keep more of what they earn.
What type of money the government should spend more on? What category they should put more funds there?
Pre-K.
Pre-K?
3 and 4, maybe some 2. You got to have the facilities, the teachers, and then the programs. And so I think the encouragement that the state is doing to the locals saying, look, if you've got an existing building and you've got a wing of that building, you could retrofit into being a pre-K facility, do it. So having facilities for public pre-K, encouraging pre-K and doing that. How to do it? Many states have enacted online sports gaming, and Georgia has not. I think if we do that, if we do online sports gaming, that money ought to go to pre-K.
Online sports gaming, gambling, right? So you want to legalize that in Georgia?
I'm not a fan at all of gambling. I would support it if the money's going to go to pre-K. If we've got something bad, gambling, and we can fund something good, pre-K literacy, I can support that as long as I know the money's going to go there.
Okay. Same logic with the high tax on cigarettes.
Yes, but I think the better analogy is the lottery tickets for college funding.
Okay.
I think we've got a good college funding landscape with the Hope Scholarship, and I think if we need some more pre-K funds, one easy way to go do that is the online sports gaming. And how does that work? I mean, UGA is playing Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl the evening of January the 1st. There will be some sports fans out there who bet, and that, you know, you have these people in Las Vegas and they say, well, Georgia's favored by a touchdown or whatever. And so they'll say, if Georgia wins by more than a touchdown, that's what I bet. So that's how that, in general, it works. I don't do it. I don't think it's a good use of money. But for the people who out there who do it, number one, they're already doing it a lot in Georgia. They're just doing it kind of illegally. They're impersonating people from other states or whatever on their phone. And so making sure that if that happens in Georgia, the money goes to teach those kids how to read. that's something I think would be a good way to fund pre-K.
There's an enterprise in Boston. The name is DraftKings.
Yep.
That is that business.
That's a good example. You know, if I go home tonight and watch SportsCenter or another sports show, there are multiple sports gambling companies already advertising nationwide. So those people in Georgia who were betting in other states or whatever, I think if we put that money to work on pre-K, that's one way to fund pre-K.
Okay. You have the estimation of how much we can collect
every year.
Tens of millions of dollars every year. Now, here's the bad thing. Some of that money is being spent by Georgians over there. So if we bring it here, some of those other states may lose the money, but we would gain it.
All right. At least the pre-K teachers and the kids, they get some benefits.
Now, I will say this. I don't think having in-person casinos or gambling establishments and all that's a good idea. I'm talking about the stuff that's already going on people's iPhone or Android, except it's going to some other state's pre-K or their system.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like really surprised by the salary of the pre-K teachers because the preschools, some of my neighbors send their kids to the preschools and I learned, okay, if they get low salary, how they can treat your kids well.
Well, let me point this out because you asked about public education earlier. The state of Georgia has increased public school teacher salaries by close to $10,000 a year over the past several years. So we are paying our teachers much better than we did 5 or 10 years ago, and I want to continue that trend to be the case. But one advantage of pre-K, a family that sends their kids to a private daycare, they're probably paying more for daycare than their house. Mm-hmm. So if we have good pre-K programs in Georgia, that has taken a financial burden off of people who are out working, who are paying a lot for daycare. I think we ought to have more of the pre-K programs take a financial burden off of working families, working people.
That's right.
这一段是佐治亚州议员里弗斯议员给所有华人的新春问候。佐治亚小帅的听众有面儿啊！
This episode will be published around the Chinese New Year season. So, yeah, you have some words for the Chinese community in America.
Definitely. Happy New Year. I wish you a prosperous and positive New Year. It's the year of the snake, right?
Snake, that's right.
All right.
Yes.
You know more about the themes than I do on that, so you could tell me a little bit about that. I will tell you, last year, in the Year of the Dragon, there was a group of young people at an American Cancer Society fundraiser in my area in Suwanee, and they were doing calligraphy. And I had just been to one of those Lunar New Year events a month or two earlier, and I asked them to do Victory in the Year of the Dragon and calligraphy. And people know Chinatown and San Francisco and other parts of the country, but Georgia not only has, good Chinese community in Atlanta, but even out in places like Johns Creek and Gwinnett County, we have a very robust Chinese community who's invested and worked hard and has a very big presence here in our area. And, just little things like Atlanta Chinese Church, which is in Tucker, kind of between Gwinnett and DeKalb County. They have an Atlanta Chinese Church North in Johns Creek that's nearly as big as the church that birthed it.
Right.
So, I love getting to see the good things that are going on in the Chinese community. I hope that 2025 is a great year for you, particularly our Chinese community, as we're going to be celebrating New Year 2025. Congratulations. I'm going to spend this time like you looking back over the blessings of the past year and looking forward to the challenges and opportunities of 2025, and I'll look forward to spending that time together with our local Chinese community as well as many other people who live in Duluth, Suwanee, and Sugar Hill. Let me know anything I can do to be a good friend and advocate in the Georgia State House.
嘿嘿 ，Last but not least， 关于地产和 EV，Reeves 议员讲了2个个人立场。
For most Chinese people, especially here in North America, the first priority is education. The second priority will be real estate. But now, a lot of them learn that without politics, they can lose education, they can lose real estate.
Yep.
Especially after the COVID, there are a lot of social news in the COVID time, 2020, 2021. Yeah, a lot of people, they get aware of that. Okay, we might need to be more aware of our rights and get out to vote for
Absolutely.
Who represent us. At the end of our podcast, I would like to spend some time on your expertise as an attorney of real estate, and also because you are not only a real estate attorney, you are also an excellent representative. So first of all, I realized the squatter law. Could you talk about that?
Absolutely. Georgia had this problem that arose very quickly. We adjourned the legislative session in 2023 in late March or early April. We came back for a special session in November, and at that time, in that 6 months or so, there was this noticeable problem with squatters in Georgia who had been educated on social media or the internet of how to give buzzwords to police and to people in eviction court to be able to take a free ride in a house that they had basically broken into. Devin Seaball, who's a representative from Cobb County, which is another big county in Georgia, he and I worked together on this law that said in Georgia a squatter should not have the same rights that a tenant does. A tenant has a lease, is paid some rent, there's an agreement with the landlord, and if a tenant falls behind, they have due process in eviction court. But a squatter who has never had a lease, never paid any rent, basically has broken into the home, they should not be on a level playing field with a tenant. No more free ride, particularly at a time where housing is scarce. We implemented the squatter bill that says, there's an expedited process if somebody files one of these squatter evictions. The police and the judge are going to review, is this squatter or a tenant? And if they're a squatter, there are going to be criminal ramifications, and they're going to get out of the unit quicker than if they were a regular tenant. During COVID, a backlog had developed with tenants, and squatters were abusing that. They were saying, hey, treat me like a tenant, and they were not paying. So it's a miserable situation. I'm proud to report Fulton County, that had hundreds of squatters, they got rid of those squatters in a matter of months. Many other counties in Georgia have, eradicated any noticeable squatter problem, and we've now isolated it down to a few jurisdictions who just aren't following the law.
Okay. You say Fulton County, 100 cases?
Oh, it was hundreds. The city of South Fulton, which is kind of the airport to the end of Fulton County, south, they had like hundreds of squatters. Their city council and police chief and police members came to our hearings and said, we got to change the law. We got to get a way to get rid of these squatters. And we gave them the tools to do it, and they used it.
That's great.
The American dream is home ownership, to be a paying tenant and then to graduate into owning a home. That is the American dream. So the squatters were literally stealing the American dream and taking a free ride, and that just shouldn't happen in Georgia.
Recently, I learned something about the property tax of other states, especially California. They have something like 2% cap, the increase cap. And you have frequently talked about the property tax reduction. Is that a direction for us in the future, or that's not something we should expect for?
All right, the California law was done statewide several decades ago, so they've had a lot of time to adjust their budgets accordingly. I don't think a statewide change like you have in California will happen here, but let me tell you what we have done. This year, the people of Georgia enacted a bill that we put on the ballot. Unless a local government opts out, there will be a cap on the growth of residential property values. It's like 3% a year or so, and you can appeal it if you think the value is even lower than that. A good number of jurisdictions are opting out of that, but we at least made it to where if they let the law go into effect, that's the default. Another thing we have here in Gwinnett County, on the Gwinnett County portion of the tax bill, there is a value offset exemption where basically the value is frozen at your purchase price. So the school portion of the bill does not have that cap, but the county portion that funds the courthouse, the county police, other county park system, the property tax is capped at your purchase price. And then also the homestead that we enacted in Gwinnett County, we double that homestead. So if you're a homeowner in Gwinnett County, you're going to have a doubled exemption. So that means for the first $8,000 or $10,000 of value, you're not going to be taxed on that, rather than $4,000.
All right. Yeah, thanks for that. I believe some people want to move to Gwinnett County someday.
Exactly. Come on up here. We support home ownership in Gwinnett. We've got about 125,000 owner-occupied homes in Gwinnett, and I hope that number goes up because we need more housing.
Yeah, did you read the news about the $6.6 billion loan of Rivian factory? I was really surprised by their funding ability for the social circle factory. Do you personally believe EV?
I think it should be a choice. I think it should be a market-based choice. I don't think the government should get too aggressive on subsidizing things like that. I think that the market and business and innovation ought to lead that and not government picking winners and losers.
Okay, what type of car you drive?
I drive a paid-for gas car. However, I think it's a good, healthy, responsible choice on the electronic and or electric vehicles. But I would point this out. I think the folks who have a local transportation pattern, that's, I think, the future of electric. I think the people who are doing long distances frequently don't pressure them into electric because the infrastructure is not there yet.
Okay.
So, yeah, let the car market and the consumer, I want to make sure it's good for the working person who's looking for a car. And right now, $100,000 vehicle, I don't know, is the right thing for the consumer.
Yeah, you know what I saw? I feel like, okay, many politicians in Georgia, they like EV because we have an EV supply chain. Not because they believe the technology is the future. We believe that there are a lot of factories, a lot of jobs, a lot of families that rely on that EV manufacturing.
I think with business, you need to have a good product. I like the Warren Buffett method of investing. If you can understand something, that's the thing to invest in. If something's convoluted and it's asking for a lot of government subsidies, I think we ought to be wary on that. I think Georgia attracts industries that are just looking for a good business climate, and I think that's what we ought to focus on, and we ought not to overdo it on using people's hard-earned tax money to incentivize things. We ought to be very modest, and we ought to make sure there's a return on the investment and a need to do that. We shouldn't overdo it on economic development incentives. It should be there for a reason, infrastructure and other things.
本期节目就到这里，这是第一期全英文的完整播客。如果你对英文口音感兴趣，这就是最典型的佐治亚州口音，欢迎多听几遍。如果希望有英文纯享版，也欢迎在评论区告诉我。不管怎样，小帅祝全球华人和播客听友蛇年大吉，大展宏图。喜欢这一期请大力转发，欢迎在苹果播客或者 Spotify 留下好评。Thank you for enjoying this episode. Please share it widely and leave me a great review on Apple Podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for more great content. See you next time and Happy Chinese New Year. Happy Lunar New Year.